everybody. Thank you for joining me for another one-man review. Today I'm looking at Curse of the Chosen, both volumes of it from the artist Alexis Deacon. This is from Flying Eye Books, which is a imprint of No Brow Press. I was originally aware of this property under the guise of Geish, the name Geish. This is volume 1. This book collects volume 1 and 2, and this is the third volume, even though they're calling it 1 and 2. So I got this book when I first found No Brow Press, and I went and ordered a bunch of their stuff and fell in love with them as a press. This was one of the books I got that I thought was so great. This is a tip what I'm used to from No Brow Press, with the nice fabric binding and this really beautiful fibrous paper they use and amazing reproduction. I have been intending to get volume 2 because I really liked this book and was looking forward to volume 3 as well, but I just hadn't got around to buying them because I'm always kind of buying all the new stuff that comes out. But really enjoyed this property. So I was pretty excited to see that they were re-releasing it in collected volumes, and then No Brow Press has been kind enough to send these to me to do a review on. So that's extra cool because I get to check out a book that I've been looking forward to. I think what's happening here is this volume is the smallest volume, and in the hardcover it's already $19. I think they're trying to re-release it in a smaller, more affordable package because the second part of this book is quite longer, so I imagine that book's more expensive, and I think they're trying to package them in a kid-friendly manner. I'm not sure what the name change is about, if there was some kind of copyright thing, but I like the original title. There's in volume 2 here, there's an explanation of what Geish is. It's kind of like a spirit or a curse, and they're saying that I told her about an ancient spell called the Geish. It worked much like the law. It was a prohibition, a threat. The Geish always forbade something. To do this thing and dire consequences would befall you. So far just like the law. No, but there was a catch. As soon as the Geish was laid on you, your fate was set. That which you must not do was the very thing which you could not avoid. And so that's where the name of that original volume is. I'm not sure what incentivized the change to Curse of the Chosen, but it's just fine. And like I said, I think part of the repackaging is that they intend this to sell this to a young teen plus audience. I would say would be the right age group up for this. There are definitely some things in here in the second volume where I guess depending on the parent, you could question if this was for kids or not. There's this one page here where the evil witch lady has some nipples on her breast, and there's a character in here where there's a very teeny tiny little weenie on him. So I guess if parents are gonna freak out about that little minute show of boobs, maybe this isn't the greatest thing. But overall, I would say this is a very good fantasy series for kids and adults as well. I quite enjoyed it. So we'll jump back to volume 1, and then I'll work my way through. I just want to start with those two things in volume 2 because I thought they were indicative. So the story is that there is this queen who's dying, and 50 souls are summoned, and one of them's going to be chosen to replace her as the new chief of the kingdom. And they call it chief, not king or queen. And then this witch, Niobe, I think is the witch's name, how you pronounce it, shows up and says, you 50 people are going to be tested through these series of magical tests, and the person who's left over at the end will be the new chief. And the first test is that they all get sent off to different parts of the land, and they have to make their way back in a certain time because a good chief would know the land well. And the first 2 people to make it back, and this isn't much spoilers because we're just on page 26 of the book, that is the counselor Nemus, and then a little girl whose name I believe is Io. I wanted to pronounce it Lo, but looking how the capital L's are written, I think her name is Io. And they're the first 2 to make it back, and they find out that not only does getting out of the contest mean that you're not going to be the chief, but it means you're dead. Even if you don't die in the competition, leaving the competition or losing a competition means you're dead. And so they're both operating under that assumption. And Nemus is basically like, well, if someone's got to die, it ain't going to be me, so it's going to be everyone else. And Io is like, well, we have to find a way to defeat the witch. And even though they're kind of the main two characters, there's really a lot of subsidiary characters that all work together. And I really like that about the book. It definitely, you can tell by the covers, these are the two kind of main characters here, the binary, but it's really not that. There's all these other characters. And when I read the first volume, there's a lot of things I tagged that I like, and I got the second volume in the mail a few days later, and I realized that a lot of the things I liked weren't just incidental character building, but really integral to the plot, so that's cool. The art in the book reminds me a lot of like Charles Vess, but less detailed, a little more loose and more of a dry brush. And then I think in the first volume, it's mostly like watercolor colorings. In the second volume, it looks like they switch over to like the ink wash and brushy stuff with digital coloring, maybe. I'm not sure. But panels like this really make me think of Charles Vess's work on Stardust with Neil Gaiman. It's really got that fantasy vibe. If you're a fan of Linda Medley's Castle Waiting, books like that, I think this would be a really good book as well, that kind of fantasy genre. I like the looseness to it. Something else I really appreciate about Alexis Deacon's work is that there's not many big panels like this, and when they are, they really land there for a purpose. But there's a lot of smaller panels, and so there's a lot of information packed in and a lot of motion, and you really, really feel like you're getting a meaty book and a meaty experience. In the first volume, like the coloring's okay on certain like the coloring's good all throughout, but it feels a little monochrome on a lot of pages. There are some pages where there's more of a balance of warm and cool, and that goes into these sherbety colors that I really like quite a bit. And there's more of this type of warm, cool balance in the second book, and I'll show you some of that. But I definitely feel like over the course of the series, Deacon became a better colorist. There's a lot of pages like this where it's a little muddier and more desaturated. It still works, but I quite like the second book. And at the end of the second book, there's a thank you to some people for some coloring assistance, and the coloring style changes a little bit, like I said, to look a little more computer done. And so I appreciate that evolution in the artwork where, pages like this, they work, but they're just, I don't know, they don't resonate as much as, say, something like that. In the second book, I finally found like the elevator pitch for how to sell this book, to tell people the gist of it without giving away too much. And you start to realize that this competition here, you see that the second competition is the 50 people are divided into two, and then they have to write their own rules, and so they're playing these games against each other. And the witch has these like helper people, and then I realized that probably the best way to pitch this book is that it's like a fantasy version of Squid Games with less brutality to it. Drawn by Charles Vess or something. It's like Charles Vess does Squid Games. It has that competition structure to it, and these weird helper people with the masks. So that gave me like an easy way to talk about the book. An example of some really, really good writing that I like, and something that actually paid off more even than I thought it did initially, was this scene here, and I'll read through it because I just think it's really fun. I won't give it away the solution. If you want the solution to this paradox that's presented, you have to go by the book. But I really like this. So one of the competitions that they get into is like a faux court case, and they're presenting this supposedly impossible to solve case, and then one of the characters winds up winning. I'll present the problem, and then you can try and figure out and go buy the book to see how they win, what the trick is. But this character here presents the first case. Several years ago, this man stood over there with a smug look on his face, approached me to teach him the law. The price I charge for such service is high. My would-be pupil could not pay. Rather than lose his chance, he offered me a bargain. If I was confident in my ability to teach, he would sign a binding oath to pay for my service in full, immediately after he won his first case. And he says, quite so. Thus, I taught him free of charge for 3 long years. But when the time came for his first case in court, he walked away, paying nothing, telling me he had decided he'd no longer wish to practice law. I ask only what is my due. I put it to you that you have no choice but to grant it to me. Either rule in my favor, that my pupil broke his oath and must pay what he owes, or rule against me, in which case my pupil will have won his first case and he must pay me as agreed. So it's one of these like damned if you do, damned if you don't cases that this say, well, if he wins, he has to pay me. If he loses, he has to pay me. And then some other things go on, and we come back to the case, and the opposition says, okay, let me review my position. My teacher has told us that there is no way he can lose. I tell you that there is no way he can win. The contract that we both signed said that I needed to pay only on my first victory. Rule in my opponent's favor, and I will still not have fulfilled that condition because he will have lost. I will be under no obligation to pay him. Rule in my favor, and you just uphold my right to withdraw before payment is due. In that case, I will not pay him either. So they've both presented a case in which if they win, they win, and if they lose, they win. But they both can present that case. And so it's like this impossible to judge. And there is like a loophole there that one of them takes advantage of. And that was really interesting to me. And then that kind of sets up some important things later on as well that I didn't realize when I had first tagged that. So that's an example of kind of the clever writing that's throughout the series. And really nothing goes to waste in the series either. Another fun thing in this volume 1 is there's like a code in the back that you can crack. I'm not someone who would take the time. I'm the type of person who would make something like this, but I've never taken the time to crack it. And then you also get a look at probably what just the black and white ink work looks like with this nice like dry brush look to it. And you'll see what I say in like Charles Vess or Linda Medley, but a little more calligraphic and loose. So really, really cool. I really like that. And you get some look at some of the more cool art in there. And then just a couple things in volume 2 that I really liked. Here's some more like where it gets a little bit darker, so definitely not for young kids, but I would say preteens and up could read this book as long as you don't mind one little boob here. So some really cool art there. We got a dragon here. And here you'll see what I'm talking about, where the colors have a better balance between the warm and cool. So like things really pop out in a way that they didn't in volume 1. And this one, the first one's entirely colored by Alexis Deacon. This one has a credit to Holly Dyer and Fionn Fitzgerald as well on the coloring. And this is the one where it looks like maybe there's dry brush and wash and then scanned in and colored rather than watercolors right on the page. And I think that helped get more control over the colors. You'll see that on this page too. There's just kind of more variety of colors and like a little bit more color contrast and a little bit more warm, cool contrast. So I like that. First volume's really good. Second volume's even better. So you're seeing an artist grow as you're reading this, and I really appreciate that. Again, here's the one little booby page if you're worried about your kids reading that. And there's one little teeny tiny weenie in there somewhere with this little mouse character. But I really enjoyed this series. It's just really good, smart, well written, well drawn fantasy. It's not the big hardcovers from Grubaugh that I like, but it's not the exact fibers paper, but it's still really nice paper. It's still really, really beautiful reproduction of everything. Like Grubaugh has the highest reproduction standards, and that applies to all their books. But it's in a more affordable volume. I do hope, because I have one of the hardcovers, I do hope eventually that they do the hardcover versions of all three, just because I would like to have that completed collection. And hopefully this being more affordable and selling well and having the kids market can then give them the justification where I can go back and finish this up. I don't know how they'd be able to do it since the first two volumes released in hardcover called Geish, but yeah, that would be cool to be able to complete this collection in the hardcover as well. So thank you so much for Grubaugh for sending this along. I really hope to be reviewing a whole bunch more of their books and speaking to a bunch of their artists. I would recommend this pretty much to anyone. Adults will enjoy this just as well, and it's a good book, like I said, for your preteen and up.
One of the best ways that you can support what we're doing here on the channel is to support the books that Sean's putting out through Living the Line. The first book that he put out is The Strange Death of Alex Raymond. It's a collaboration between Dave Sim and myself. The book was recently nominated for an Eisner Award in the Best Reality-Based category. It's a deep, deep dive into the artwork and methods of Alex Raymond and the mystery surrounding his death in a car crash. So if you haven't grabbed that already, please do. There's also Yokoyama Yuichi's Plaza, which is a totally intense manga by an artist who has somehow figured out how to distill manga down to its purest essence. This book was successfully funded on Kickstarter, but if you missed the Kickstarter, you can order it through any comic store, any bookstore, Amazon, any place that you would normally get your graphic novels from. The Abolition of Man is a 5-issue mini-series done by myself and Sean in collaboration with the Midjourney AI. What you're seeing here is the cover to issue 1 and the first couple pages of issue 1. This first issue, we fed it an essay by C.S. Lewis, and this is just the imagery that the computer spat back at us. Issues 2 and 3 are a narrative, starting with the story that I wrote when I was 21, and then Sean's going to write issue 3, picking up where I left off. In this one, I'm kind of trying to force the AI to give me the images I want, and then doing some tweaking in Photoshop to get these kind of colored looks on it. For issue 4, we're turning the task of writing over to the AI as well. So the AI has written the script, and then we've just put that into the Midjourney AI, and it's turned out art. The script and the art is some of the absolutely most horrific stuff I've ever seen. We're a bit scared to even publish this issue. And I don't have any art to show for it yet, but Sean and I have decided to do a 5th issue of Abolition as well, because we have someone who we're really, really excited to have on board, providing an essay for that 5th issue that we'll illustrate, and we'll announce more about that soon.
Thanks for following along. Take it away, Jack.
You want to see all these books? Smash that subscribe button and the like button and the bell, and then you get them.